because I really, really could have killed him easily, and I didn't.
A young soldier in Vietnam is ordered to bring back a deserter at gunpoint.
After I got back to California, I kept dreaming about firefights and ground attacks that I had never been in. I couldn't control them. I tried to drink myself free of these dreams, but the dreams kept coming regardless.
And later, upon his return to the States, he struggles with forgiveness and the lingering violence of the war. Hello, and welcome to the Mighty Pen Podcast. I'm David L. Robbins, your host and founder of the Mighty Pen Project, a writing program for veterans and their spouses, in partnership with the Virginia War Memorial Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. In this podcast, I'll sit down with David Aldridge, author of today's two stories, Rosario and Bonne. David served 23 years in the U.S. Army with 3 tours in Vietnam. Now let's listen to Rosario, powerfully read by Alan Sater.
In November 1968, the commanding general of the 1st Infantry Division commanded all soldiers fit for duty to go to the field. That meant no more slacking or malingering tolerated by those who were slightly injured, lame-brained, or just plain lazy. I have no idea where he got the gung-ho idea from, perhaps because in World War II every soldier was considered an infantryman and was used to pulling their own weight. The 1st Infantry Division was the only one, as far as I knew, that made their finance clerks and REMFs, rear echelon military folks, go outside the wire at night on ambush. It was not unusual to see a finance guy with a Purple Heart or Bronze Star with a V device. A rifle company should have 132 men assigned to go on operations. We rarely had more than 75 mustered for fighting the enemy. Normally, there were always a few guys on R&R, recovering from wounds. Once in a while, someone went on emergency leave to the States, but divorces didn't count. Dear John letters were so plentiful that the Army never allowed a soldier to travel back home to try to mend the marriage. All soldiers whose wives had moved on were supposed to tough it out. In Vietnam, there were many ways to sham, fake injuries, or simply disappear when it was time to board the choppers. Fear was the main reason. I'd even heard of soldiers injuring themselves to avoid field duty. When the CG put the word out, it was welcomed by those of us who had never sought ways to avoid combat. Our own company, Delta Company of the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry Regiment, was on stand down in Lai Khe, our base camp, when the CG gave his imperative. My company commander, who was called Captain Zapp, said to round up all stragglers, bring them to battalion headquarters to have a chat with our battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Vernon C. Coffey, Jr. I loved LTC Coffey. He was as tough as they come. He'd been an instructor at the Ranger School. We called him the Black Moses because he always walked with a 7-foot-long wooden stave as his walking stick. I once asked him why he didn't carry a CAR-15 or a rifle like many of the officers. My job is to command and to lead. If someone needs killing, I got 400 soldiers for that. Roger that, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Coffey knew me by name and by my call sign, Delta 36. He always called me by my first name. Some may have considered it unprofessional or unmilitary, but it warmed my heart to hear it. When the order came down to round up everyone for our next operation, Captain Zapp sent word for me to come to the orderly room. I reported in. Sir, Spec 4 Aldridge reporting as ordered. Aldridge, Rosario's been AWOL for more than 2 weeks. I have some intel that he's holed up at the Lai Khe fire station. Take some men down there, bring him back. The CG has ordered every swinging dick to go to the field, and we're not leaving without Rosario. What if he doesn't want to come back, sir? We'll do whatever you have to do to make him comply. The CG's order will be carried out. Every available soldier will go to the field, or I have to personally tell the CG why not. Yes, sir. I'll bring him back. Rosario is one of those nondescript guys from Guam who could easily pass for Vietnamese. When I tried to talk with him, he'd just purse his lips and look at me with a puzzled look like he didn't understand me. When he scrunched up his face like that, he probably thought it looked cute somehow. It only made me want to punch him straight in the mouth. He was known to be a slacker, always looking for ways to get out of the field. I have no idea why, but his nickname was Pineapple. I went back to my platoon, gathered up a squad of guys to go with me. Ray Scanone from Great Neck, New York, who normally carried a machine gun. Mike Fleming of Omaha, Nebraska, solid, fearless soldier. Louis Ragusa from Brooklyn, and my RTO. These were all absolutely dependable guys in a fight. I had a feeling Rosario wouldn't come back voluntarily. Along with us was Chuck Liotto, tough little guy from Chicago. Chuck and Ray had borrowed 38 caliber pistols from some helicopter pilot who'd given us a ride one time. I took Ray's .45 automatic that he normally carried along with his machine gun. As we approached the fire department on Route 13, I had everyone wait by the main road while I went in to talk with the Vietnamese firemen. They all spoke English. "Who's the boss?" One of the firemen came over. "I'm the fire captain. I'm looking for one of our soldiers, Rosario." "No, I don't know him. He also goes by the nickname of Pineapple. Now, boss, don't fuck with me. Just point out where he is. Take your men away from here." His eyes veiled as he considered his options. He slowly nodded towards the door I'd come through. He moved to the doorway and silently nodded to a room at the side of the firehouse. I whispered, "Didi Mao, go quickly." I jacked around into the chamber of my .45 sidearm, put on the safety catch. I motioned for my soldiers to fan out, for one to go around the back of the building. I kicked in the door, ran into the room. There in bed with a Vietnamese girl lay Rosario. They'd both been sleeping. I caught him unawares. "Hey, Rosario, get up and get dressed. General says you're going back to the bush with us." I recognized the girl, a beautiful Cambodian named Ope. She understood English. "Hey, go home, Ope. Pineapple's going with us." Rosario scrunched up his face as he always did. I wanted badly to punch him. He slowly put his pants and boots on. His movements were exaggeratedly drawn out. "Get a move on, Rosario. Colonel Coffey's waiting for you." After he tied his boots, he said he had to get his shirt out of the wardrobe at the side of the room. "You fuck around, you're going to die, Rosario." He just smirked. He reached into the wardrobe for his jungle fatigue shirt. He began putting it on. He pulled a hand grenade out of the pocket and quickly pulled the pin. He clearly had rehearsed the move. I shouted, "Everybody get the fuck out of here. He's got a grenade." I leveled the .45. "Rosario, if you let that handle fly, I'll put 5 rounds in your ugly fucking ass and I'll still have time to get away. You better make a decision because I will damn sure fuck you up." I took my safety catch off and aimed at his head. I wanted badly to fill him with lead, then make a dash, threatening me, a fellow American, with a hand grenade just so he wouldn't have to go to the field enraged me. I still hadn't decided not to shoot him when he decided for me. Rosario slowly began walking back towards battalion headquarters. I told all my soldiers to keep their distance in case anything happened. I never took my pistol off of him. As we approached the area where Captain Zapp said I had to meet up with Lieutenant Colonel Coffey, I noticed Rosario trying to put the pin back in the grenade. "That's your smartest move so far today, fuckhead." Suddenly, soldiers up ahead began screaming in unison, "Sir, he's got a grenade and he's shooting at us." I thought they were talking about Rosario, but how could that be? We'd only just arrived and Rosario wasn't shooting at anybody. But automatic weapons fire roared out of the bunker to the side of the road 50 yards in front of us. I saw Lieutenant Colonel Coffey take cover. Everyone around him dove for cover, too, behind rubber tires and bunkers. Rosario used the distraction to get rid of the hand grenade by tossing it to a guy from his platoon, Willie Davenport. Rosario yelled, "Take this and get rid of it." I grabbed Rosario by the scruff of the neck and told Davenport, "Don't do it, Willie. I need that for evidence." But Davenport grabbed the grenade, ran off to dump the proof of his buddy's idiocy. I shouted, "Someone catch that stupid fuck and get the grenade from him." Scanone sprinted away with Liotto behind him. Rosario kept whining for me to let him go. As we approached Lieutenant Colonel Coffey and the rest, they were still hunkered down, expecting more fire from the bunkers. I reported in, "Sir, this fucker pulled out a hand grenade, pulled the pin on me up at the firehouse. He doesn't know how close he came to dying." Lieutenant Colonel Coffey called over to the command sergeant major. "Sergeant Major, take this soldier and we'll discuss the situation later." I asked, Sir, if I may ask you, who's in the bunker? A soldier from Delta named Whitcomb. Oh, yes, sir. Willie Whitcomb. This was a bad day for the Willies in our battalion. I'd like to offer a solution as soon as my soldier gets back with the hand grenade Rosario pulled on me. We give Willie to the count of 10 to come out. Lieutenant Colonel Coffey laughed. No, Dave. We'll try to resolve this in a more peaceful way. He smiled, but I was in no mood for the Rosarios and Whitcombs. Lieutenant Colonel Coffey was clearly not as impatient as I. He proceeded to calmly talk with Whitcomb. I was simply amazed at his courage, calm demeanor. For 15 minutes, Lieutenant Colonel Coffey spoke with Whitcomb as if he were his own son, reasoning with him as to why he should put down his weapon and unask the bunker before someone like me threw a hand grenade in there to force him out. Finally, Whitcomb came out and surrendered his weapon to Lieutenant Colonel Coffey. The MPs showed up, put handcuffs on Willie, drove off with him. A few hours later, we all got on helicopters at the airfield and flew out to the Iron Triangle, where we established a base camp called Cantigny. During my time in Vietnam, I was never known for being a peacemaker. When Rosario pulled the grenade on me, my normal reaction was to kill him. I'd stifled that urge, only with great effort, but it remained barely under the surface of my consciousness. During our first ground attack at Cantigny on 20 November 1968, I considered leaving my bunker to search out Rosario. It was a fleeting thought. I was busy shooting at North Vietnamese most of the night. A few days later, we moved closer to the Saigon River, set up a new base called Junction City 3. At JC3, we got another ground attack on 1 December 1968. The first thought that popped into my mind during the chaos was, where the fuck is Rosario? For the next 4 hours, I mauled, killing him, but couldn't leave my bunker as we were in danger of being overrun. When we ran low on ammunition, I volunteered to crawl back to our ammo bunker and retrieve enough ammo and grenades for everyone. At the doorway to the bunker, I paused. Rosario's bunker was less than 50 meters from me. Dark thoughts of revenge clouded my mind. Begrudgingly, I got busy collecting what I needed. I hurried back to my bunker and continued the fight. When the battle was over and the sun came up, I ended up talking with some soldiers from other platoons. I was told that Rosario spent the whole night holed up in a bunker, whimpering and howling that he was going to die. I normally have a soft spot in my heart for people who experience fear like that. I didn't feel shit for Rosario. I still wanted to punch him in the mouth and fuck him up. I made the decision to not kill him, as it would only complicate my life. A few months later, I returned to the States. As the years wore on, the anger I carried for Rosario ate away at me, as did my anger at 1,000 others who'd betrayed me or my friends, or who simply fell short of my expectations. In my search for a more meaningful and spiritual life, I had a truly dark night of the soul in 1993 in Ulm, Germany. I was led to a book called A Course in Miracles. I read the book and attempted to follow the precepts it laid out. The main idea behind the course is forgiveness, probably the hardest battle a person will ever fight, because you're going up against yourself, your little self, also called the ego. Practicing the forgiveness exercises from the course, I'd settle into a comfortable chair, relax my arms and legs, and straighten my spine. After a few moments, I would say aloud, "Okay, I am ready." Then, in my mind's eye, I'd see literally hundreds of people lined up ready for me to forgive. Rosario was always there. I'd make him move to the end of the line. I wasn't ready. Finally, one day Rosario was the last one left in line. I'd forgiven all the rest, no others to shove him behind. I finally released us both from all my judgments about him and what he had done to me in Vietnam. The peace I felt was indescribable. I walked on clouds for days. Out of curiosity, I sat down to meditate one day to see if anyone else had shown up for me to forgive. As I got comfortable and stilled my mind, I said, once again, Okay, I'm ready. There, smiling back at me, was me. I had my work cut out. Time to get busy.
I'm joined in the studio by my good friend David Aldridge, the author of Rosario. David, that story is powerful on a lot of levels. It strikes me that its deepest truth is about forgiveness, not just for Rosario, but for yourself. And I'd like to discuss those things because before we start, I'd like to observe to my audience that we've had about 24 Mighty Pen classes over the years, and you've taken all but about one or two of them. It says a great deal about your desire to catalog your experiences in the military, but mostly the reason why I love the story Rosario is because it's about so much more than service and Vietnam. It's about the human need to be forgiven and to forgive. Let's start with you, your need to be forgiven. You served 3 tours in Vietnam. You've lived quite a life. Let's talk about the change that happened when you read The Course in Miracles and how you became a man who sought forgiveness for yourself. How did that change you? When you left Vietnam, you carried some burdens, yeah.
Yeah, as I think did anyone who served in Vietnam at that time. And we don't realize that right off the bat. It's not something that you're conscious of immediately. Vietnam was something that needed to be assimilated over a period of years. It took me quite a while to figure out exactly what had happened. I resolved never to forget anything I experienced in Vietnam. I always carried these stories, these experiences with me wherever I went. They become part of you. And my last tour ended in 1971, and I had basically 22 years. I just was doing my best to work, do a good job, whatever job I had, be successful in the relationships that I had, but I wasn't all that successful. I think Vietnam changed me in a lot of ways and made me harder and more isolated. I needed to really figure out where I stood in this world and how I was going to proceed if I lived further, if I lived more, if I lived longer. I needed to figure all that out. Well, I came to a point in Germany where I had some difficulty in relationships, and it frustrated me so much that I actually prayed for the first time in my life. I mean, really dropped to my knees and prayed. And what I heard from my inner voice was I needed to go to the Eichhorn bookstore. And of course, I just poured my heart out to God. I was hoping to hear the secrets of the universe.
And you got an address.
And I was told, go to a bookstore.
Yeah, weirdly
And
randomly specific,
yeah.
right?
And it was 165 miles away from where I was working at the time in Vilseck, Germany. And I argued with the voice for a few days and said, what are you talking about?
You got anything closer?
Yeah. Got anything over in Nuremberg,
Yeah.
maybe? No, I had to go to the Eichhorn bookstore. That was the answer every time. So I finally did go. And of course, I was led to the back room where they had books they didn't know what to do with. And so they didn't have them cataloged right. And the voice told me, look up. And I looked up and to the top shelf in this room. And the voice said, look to the right. And I looked to the right. And when my eyes lit on the book, it sort of glowed, honestly. The lettering on it was gold, and it sort of shone brighter somehow. And so the voice said, that's the one, take it down. The owner later, months and months later, said, David, I saw you crying when you bought a book from me one time. Did that book help you?" And I I couldn't put it in words how much this book was what I needed at the time to figure things out in my life. It truly is about forgiveness, not only of yourself, but anybody you've ever come into contact with, your own parents, your own brothers. And it's been with me now for 30 years, and I couldn't really live the way I was living before, full of judgment, full of grievances about everything that ever happened. The story about Rosario is a powerful story, I think, because I really, really could have killed him easily, and I didn't. I held that somehow in my being. This desire to harm him because of what he did to me, pulling the hand grenade. And today, I can say truthfully, I send Rosario love wherever he is, whether he's still in this earth or if he's departed, I don't care. Wherever Rosario exists today, I send him nothing but love. And I am indebted to him for this great lesson in my life. And so why wouldn't I bless him? That's the benefit of doing A Course in Miracles, I think. I know some people have said, it's all New Age stuff. Well, maybe New Age, and it was all new to me for sure. But I needed something to help me let go of all the grievances I held.
Talk to me about where your head is now as a result of having the chance to tell all these stories. You've written 60-ish stories over the last several years with the Mighty Pen, yeah?
Yeah.
And what's that mean to you? Can you put it in a capsule, what it is you're trying to communicate? It's not just your life. You're not just writing episodes. All of your stories, all of which I've read, they're about more than David Aldridge. What are you telling us?
All the while I was experiencing all these things, whether it was a ground attack or the deal with Rosario or other things, stories that I felt needed to be told. And I needed to put it down on paper. I knew what the experience was. And all the while I was having these experiences, whether it was in Vietnam or afterwards, my inner voice kept telling me, remember this, remember this. And so I did. You don't want to go against your own inner voice. I never have. I have taken over 20 classes. I've written actually over 110 stories. It was a little difficult at first because I would sit there and just weep because most of the time that I was in Vietnam, I heard my inner voice. And I never disobeyed my inner voice. I never had the guts to ask, who are you? You know, I never asked the voice, who are you? So I I had those experiences. I was saved from death, certain death, dozens and dozens of times. And so remembering the experience and then writing about it later was a way of fulfilling, it was almost like a promise I made that I would remember everything and write about it so that other people could benefit from that experience. You don't have to go to war and be threatened with a hand grenade to learn how to forgive, but apparently I did. I think that if you can learn to forgive just one person that truly you've been estranged from, it's easy to let a grudge go and dissipate when you realize it really has no substance. It
Right.
has no meaning.
Rosario was a powerful example of that. And I thank you for writing it. Thank you for coming in today. David Aldridge, author of Rosario, longtime student of the Mighty Pen Project. Thank you, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now our second story, Bonne, also read by Alan Sater. Then I'll talk some more with author David Aldridge.
After receiving an honorable discharge from the Army in 1967, I finally got a job. Just before Thanksgiving, the owner and the manager of the Gulf Station in Garden Grove, California, decided to take a chance on me. They were both veterans, knew how hard it was when you get out of the service. The owner said to call him Red. He was in his 50s, fought in Europe. He showed me the ropes and how to manage the station. I soon found out he had a larcenous heart. His instructions were troublesome. He told me, always check under the hood. Keep a sharp penknife concealed in your hand so you can cut the fan belt or punch a hole in the radiator hose. Tell the customers they need immediate replacement. Show them the evidence. That's how we get most of our business, because I don't make much on the gas. I merely nodded. He then said, and when you check the oil, don't put the dipstick all the way back in. Show the customer they're running low on oil. When you put oil in the car, use the oil from our 55-gallon drum. I get it wholesale. We make a hell of a profit that way. Yes, sir. The cheap oil. Always try to sell an additive like STP or Bardol. We have a special deal with sales guys for those companies. I simply nodded, tried to look interested in how to bamboozle our customers. Red showed me how to use a cash register, how to close up at night after I put all the money in a hidden floor safe. I had to write on a clipboard the meter readings from every gas pump, count all the cans of oil, additives, etc. Job was 7 days a week. On weekends, I was offered double shifts so that the regular manager, George, could have time off. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, I got proficient at all the paperwork. Everyone seemed pleased with me. George was a Japanese guy who'd fought in Europe, too. George was nice enough, so I told him straight up on my first day, George, I cannot fuck up someone's hoses or cheat them. I don't want that kind of shit on my conscience. He looked at me like he was disappointed, and finally he said, that's okay. You just do the best you can to sell as much oil and the other stuff. I agreed I would do my best. It wasn't in me to deceive the trusting customers who chose to come to us for their gas and oil needs. I never saw the owner again. George opened the station every morning at 6 a.m., ran the show till I showed up at 3 p.m. I closed every night, midnight. George was one hell of a mechanic. He used to repair all the weapons and vehicles in his unit during the war. When George left for the day, I took over. On busy nights, time flew. I could keep the images of Vietnam out of my head. Slow nights were hell. It was during those times that all of my tour would come back and assault me. I couldn't wait to get off so I could go get something to drink. One thing that bothered me was the never-ending feeling that without a weapon I was naked and vulnerable. I started carrying my mother's .25 caliber automatic pistol. If I was caught, it'd mean 5 years in prison at a minimum because I didn't have a concealed weapons permit. I prayed I wouldn't have to use it on someone, but I felt better with it in my fatigue jacket pocket. Kept 3 full extra magazines with me also. I knew it wouldn't kill someone outright like a .45 pistol, but it'd sure fuck up someone's day. I've always been a voracious reader. I could read the entire newspaper in 15 minutes. My mother joked that I'd read cereal boxes when I was a kid. I could never get enough. None of my 4 brothers read anything but the comics or the sports pages, but to me, knowledge was power. So I read everything. My family subscribed to the LA Times, the Orange County Register. If I could have, I would have subscribed to the New York Times, too. As Christmas 1967 drew near, I began to read about a gang of 5 thugs robbing gas stations all over Orange County. Well, that got my attention. They'd beaten one station attendant half to death, left him in a coma. The only description was that there were 5 of them, probably ex-cons looking for an easy buck by striking late at night when no witnesses were around. Every day I read of the further misadventures of these thugs. I hoped the police would stake out someplace, catch him in the act. That'd make all of Southern California safer. And New Year's Eve arrived. I was eager to get it over and done with. New Year's Day was the big game on TV with USC and Indiana playing at the Rose Bowl. I wanted to watch. My brother Rick played for USC. I was excited to see how he would do. New Year's night, getting ready for work, I fixed a couple of sandwiches, debated whether to take my mother's pistol. My inner voice said, "Take it, you're going to need it." I first heard that voice and learned to trust it in Vietnam. With no further thought, I stuffed the pistol in my jacket pocket, made sure I pocketed the extra magazines as well. I cranked my motorcycle to life. In 10 minutes was at work, got the keys from George. He told me to be careful because there'd been more gas station robberies last few nights. I wished him Happy New Year. He took off. Nothing exceptional happened that night. I sold a bunch of oil, STP, Bardol, bound to make George and Red happy. Other than that, business was slow. People were out partying already. Fireworks exploded all over Orange County. The sudden reports of skyrockets exploding kept me vigilant. I fixed my eyes on the side of the station where it'd be easy to park a car out of sight. Approaching midnight, I grabbed the clipboard to record the gas pump readouts. I inventoried all the oil and additives along with the antifreeze containers. I locked all the pumps, went back to the office. I made sure to lock the door, then counted out the money from the register, put it in the floor safe. I'd just finished locking the safe when a vehicle drove up next to the building. My inner voice said very clearly, "You get ready, this is it." 5 swarthy-looking men in dark clothes ambled towards the office door. They exuded an evil presence in the way they looked at me through the locked door. I wasn't afraid, but slowly took a deep breath, reached into my pocket for the pistol. Locking eyes with the leader, I pulled out the gun, jacked around into the chamber. The leader put his hand on the front door and pushed. I double-locked it. It held firm. I laid the pistol on the desk in front of me. I waited, never taking my eyes off the gang leader. With my left hand, I drew one of the magazines out of my pocket and held it ready. The leader and I stared at each other for a full minute. I'd make sure to shoot him in the face first before going for the others. Headshots or shots to the throat were my best bet. The leader turned to speak with the other 4. Unhurriedly, they turned, returned to their car, drove away. I checked my watch. Midnight. The year ago in Saigon, the Vietnamese and the Chinese down in Cho Lan wished each other Happy New Year in French. Bonne Annee, they yelled to each other and to the Americans. Oh, the warm, lush smells of Saigon streets came rushing back to me. I locked up, drove to Daisy Mae's bar on Beach Boulevard. Beer rarely tasted so good. It looked like 1968 was going to be a great year. USC won the Rose Bowl. I read in the late edition to the Orange County Register the next day that the gang had killed an attendant at a 24-hour gas station up in Santa Ana. They beat him to death. Got away with $50 cash and cigarettes.
We're here with David Aldridge, author of Bonne. David, Bonne, on its surface, is a story about a young man in a gas station who manages not to be mugged. But right below the surface of this story is the change that military service, in this instance Vietnam, worked on you. This was a story about professional killers, people who later that night, I understand, did in fact beat up and kill somebody for $50 worth of cigarettes, right? And they took a look at you, 19, 20-year-old kid right back from Vietnam, and they said, nah, not this guy. I know you served in the 28th Infantry and you were in the Black Lions. That story, Bonne, is the conclusion, very near the conclusion of your first of 3 tours. Walk us through who that young man was in that gas station.
I had just been discharged from the Army on the 8th of November, and this was about 3 weeks after a huge battle we had called the Battle of Onton on the 17th of October. We had our battalion commander killed, the sergeant major, everybody in the headquarters group was killed. We had 64 people total killed, and the battalion was not combat ready anymore. We had to get new people in. My heart was just torn apart because all of my friends were dead. I needed to go off someplace and heal, so I decided not to re-enlist. I went back home and I started looking for a job. All the while, I kept having these dreams about opening body bags and spraying bug juice on my friends' faces. I actually did that. I had to go to graves registration and identify everybody who was killed. And then I had other dreams after I got back to California. I kept dreaming about firefights and ground attacks that I had never been in. I couldn't control them. I tried to drink myself free of these dreams, but the dreams kept coming regardless. I was having a terrible time adjusting, and it was compounded by the fact that nobody wanted to hear anything about Vietnam. They didn't want to hear about my friends who were dead. They didn't want to hear about the heroic soldiers that I had served with. I was having a terrible time adjusting, and then I got the job at the Gulf Station.
The owner says, hey, cut some wiring, slit some tubes, and sell some Bardol, and you couldn't do it, like the story told us. So that night, you were still hearing your voice, yeah? And the voice said, take your mother's gun.
Yeah, at first I couldn't believe it. My mother had a .25 automatic, and the voice said, take your mother's gun with you. I didn't know how this gun was going to be used, but I know I was supposed to take it with me. I had that with me on New Year's Eve, and this gang of guys had been going around robbing gas stations all over Southern California. They had messed up some kid in Santa Ana just for $30 worth of cigarettes. And, you know, they didn't just take the cigarettes. They decided to beat him up also. I remember a lady drove up. She said something about she needed some oil or something. So while she was standing there, my inner voice said, they're coming. I got rid of her as fast as I could, finished the tally sheet on the each gas tank, went in the office and double locked the door. It wasn't 2 minutes after I put the money in the floor safe that these guys drove up. They parked to the side of the gas station, got out, all 5 of them, and they slowly walked to the front of the office. I had turned all the lights off. Vietnam, of course, prepares you, if you're in the infantry, it prepares you to kill. And we did a lot of that in the Big Red One. And so I knew I was going to have to kill somebody that night, and I was resolved. I would take out as many of them as I could. Figured I would shoot the first guy in the face, the second guy maybe in the throat. I was getting ready to kill another human being, and thank God I didn't have to shoot anybody that night. And I did breathe a sigh of relief that I didn't have to kill somebody, because that always takes its toll on you whenever you have to shoot somebody. It takes its toll on you. And so they walked away, and they went to another gas station, and they actually murdered the guy. They beat him to death for 30, 40, $50 worth of cigarettes.
You did 3 tours in Vietnam. This was the end of your first tour. You have said no one would listen to you. You had a hard homecoming at the San Francisco airport. You tried to talk to your mother, and she just would say things like, I'm just glad you're home, darling. You would try to talk to your friends, and they had inane questions about killing people and just you were surrounded by people who would not give you visibility on your experience. This experience, I know, came very early when you were home, but things continued and you decided to go back to Vietnam. Why?
I felt alienated, even from my own family. They didn't want to hear about Vietnam. They didn't want to hear about any firefights or ambushes we had been in or blown, any ground attacks. They didn't want to hear anything. They just didn't want to hear about shooting and killing. And I don't know exactly why. I've asked my oldest brother why he never was interested. And he said he didn't know. He just felt like it was a subject that better not talked about back in the 60s. And he was in the Air Force. I had these experiences and I couldn't talk about them with anybody. I tried to talk about them with my friends from high school and college. They didn't want to hear either. They had these preconceived ideas that I was over there raping or killing children or something, and it was ridiculous. So in addition to that alienation from everybody and that isolation, I felt betrayed. And it was almost like I had gotten out of prison or something, and that's how they treated me. I was a persona non grata. I had these dreams about ground attacks and firefights and walking point again. I had them every night. Sometimes they would repeat. I would have the same dream 3 times, 4 times in the night. And I would wake up just totally confused. I was in college. I was working, but I kept having these dreams. And the day I resolved I'm going back in the Army and I'm going back to Vietnam, all of this pressure and this stress from the dreams and everything just lifted away from me. And I felt like, wow, that's what it's like to make the right decision. And I knew it was something I was supposed to do. You can call it destiny, you can call it fate, kismet, karma, whatever name you want to put to it. I was supposed to go back to Vietnam. Nobody could believe I actually wanted to go back there. They all thought I was nuts. And after I got back there, I was offered a battlefield commission. I turned it down because they would have made me go to another battalion, and I wanted to be right there in my old company. And then after I got to the company, I was offered the position of being a platoon leader, and I accepted immediately. My company commander was Gerard S. Grosso, Jerry Grosso, Captain Grosso, and he was buried last November in Arlington. And he trusted me to be a leader for 30 men. It was a tremendous responsibility, and I accepted it immediately.
We've got many more stories to explore written by David Aldridge ahead for our podcast listeners. David, always a thrill to see you. You're buying lunch. Thank you for dropping by the studio.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yes, sir. The Mighty Pen is a free writing program for military veterans offered by the Virginia War Memorial Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the Mighty Pen or sign up for one of our writing classes on Zoom, or just send us your thoughts, email us at mppodcast@vawarmemorial.org or use the link in the podcast description. If you want to read today's stories and many more, use the link to go to the Mighty Pen archive. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share it. Music for this episode was provided by Ratib Rahman from the VCU Arts Department of Music. If you'd like to support the Mighty Pen, follow the charitable donation link in the podcast description. I'm David L. Robbins, and I want to thank you for listening to the Mighty Pen podcast. It's an honor.